We are celebrating Asian Heritage Month in Canada, and today we have a very special guest. She is a force in journalism, a trailblazer who brings both heart and edge to every headline.
I'm Shanelle Kaul.
Is a correspondent for CBS News based in New York City. But before landing on the national stage, she spent over a decade reporting and anchoring across Canada newscasts at CP24. But her journey didn't start in front of the camera. From working assignment desks to anchoring major newscasts, Chanel's rise through the ranks is truly inspiring. Today, we're going behind the scenes with Chanelle to talk about what she's doing now and how she navigated change and what it means to evolve. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to just dive into it and get to know about your journey and how you navigated change. So first of all, let's start from the very beginning. How did you
Mhm.
get into journalism? You're a child of immigrants. Did that influence you in some way to get into this industry?
I mean, I'm also an immigrant, so I mean, it's the whole reason that I wanted to be a journalist. But I don't think I knew that when I was little because, as you might know, a lot of Asian families do not want their children to pursue creative careers, or at least didn't when I was growing up. I think the safer choices are doctor, lawyer, engineer, the academic professions. And so, my parents' idea of success definitely looked like that. And that's what I thought I was going to do. And that's the direction I was moving in. It felt like my whole childhood and teenage years. But yeah, I mean, my parents have been through so much. My mom is from Sri Lanka, my dad is from India, and they both, experienced civil unrest. And so, hearing those stories growing up, eventually we moved to Canada because of the Gulf War in the Middle East. So, all of these little pieces kind of fell together when I realized that telling stories just felt like such an integral part of my childhood. And I just wanted to use the platform that I have today to share stories like my parents, from people whose voices maybe didn't matter as much when we were growing up.
hmm And Chanel, as I mentioned earlier, started out, in the newsrooms and doing editorial work and working in assignment desks. Tell
Mhm.
us about the journey. Have you always wanted to be on camera? Was that really your,
God, no.
okay? Tell us how you got to where you are now.
I think that I tried just about everything else. And I did a million internships when I was in university, studying journalism. And I don't know why, but like nothing felt quite right. And I remember in third year, I phoned my dad and I was like, I think I'm just gonna apply to law school after this. Like, I'm just not feeling like I found my thing. And he was like, well, finish this year, see how you feel. And then in my fourth year of school at TMU, I did an internship at Global News in Toronto, and I was so fortunate to be interning with a reporter named Sean O'Shea, who I'm sure you're familiar with, who is just like such a gem and just became such an incredible mentor. And not just to me, he's like known to be mentor to so many young journalists.
Me too.
And really, oh, you too.
Yes,
It's
yeah,
such a
I
small
work for
world.
them.
Yeah.
I work for them. I interned at Global News Toronto as
Did
well.
you?
Yeah.
Okay, so then you'll understand what it was like, which I just feel like he took me under his wing and really let me actually do some work, which was incredible. Like I got to do interviews for him and pitch stories and write stories. And yeah, it was there that I realized that I love television. I love how the sausage is made, and I love being part of that process. And I think it was a style of storytelling that just felt like it felt like me.
And yeah, it totally started at Global News as well. And
I
Sean and
love that.
they're still there. Like
Shout out to Sean
they
O'Shea.
just so amazing, just the most down to earth, journalist. And at
Yeah.
that time when I was interning, I was like, obviously you're starstruck and you're working with
So starstruck.
reporters,
Yeah.
reporters, and just yeah, he is that kind of person. He would take that time to teach you. He's just very inspiring. So, and now you're here, you're in front of the camera. You you spent over a decade, correct? At CP24.
I spent probably about a decade reporting across
Reporting
Canada.
across Canada.
Yeah. So my first job right out of that internship at Global, I think that was a couple of months that you do the internship for school. And then at the end of that, they hired me as I think what it was called at that time was an editorial assistant, which is the most like entry level job that you can get in a newsroom. And
Mhm.
my assignment was to be at the assignment desk, which for folks who aren't familiar, is sort of the beating heart of the newsroom. It's the driving force. It is the connecting piece to every part of how news gets on the air. And so you'll know because you spent time in that newsroom as well. But the shape of Global News Toronto's newsroom at that time was sort of this bowl. And the correspondents and reporters and producers were all around, and the assignment desk sort of sat at the bottom and the very middle of that bowl.
Mhm.
And at that time, which was like, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago, I can't remember. Um, we had all of the police scanners and the emergency
Yes.
scanners.
Oh,
And so you
yeah.
would sit at the desk around, I don't know, dozens of scanners. And it was the most crazy experience of my life. But I think I had never felt so much adrenaline as I had there. And you're just sitting there listening to all of these kind of things happening around you, trying to dissect what is important, what's escalating in the moment, what's going to maybe make news tonight.
Mhm.
And so you listen to these police calls as they come in, and then you're doing your own little internal investigation, looking on Twitter to see if anyone's posted any videos or photos, so you can kind of get a sense of how critical the situation is. And then it's your job to make a decision. Are you going to send somebody there? Then a camera guy and a reporter gets there and they tell you, okay, this is what we see. And you're making some calls from the newsroom, trying to confirm some information so you can relay that to the reporter. They do a piece for the evening news that night, and you sit there and you're like, oh my gosh, I just watched all of that happen in front of me. And I
Exactly.
think that was like such an incredible experience because although it's an entry level job, you are interacting with every single person in the newsroom, the reporter, the producer, the writer, the anchor. And you
Mhm.
get to see how it goes from a call on a scanner to a story on the evening news. That is incredible.
My favorite part was getting streeters. I was editorial assistant.
That was your favorite part?
Well, one of my favorites because I felt like a reporter, right? Because you're talking,
Yes.
because I was an
I was
aspiring reporter. So I was like, oh, I feel like a reporter here. I got my camera guy and just getting streeters. That was a lot of
that
fun.
was it's so funny you say that because that was my least favorite part
Oh, really?
because I think but it's such a critical skill to learn. I'm so glad that they make you do that because you will never be scared of rejection ever in your life
Absolutely.
after being on the corner of a street trying to do streeters. And it has made me so compassionate too. If you ever walk around, obviously in New York, but in Toronto as well, where you are, where people are on the side of the street, they need you to sign a petition or whatever. I'm so compassionate to those people because I have been there. I know what that is like. The rejection is so not easy.
And Chanel, as a journalist, I know like you have to start, in the small markets. You moved around throughout your career, and this podcast is all about navigating change and helping people, not just to survive, but thrive in life. Like, how did
Mm.
you even navigate, all these changes in your career? Because you had to move around doing your work.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because so the first place I moved was Regina, Saskatchewan, for my very first full-time on-air reporting job. And I had never been to Regina, Saskatchewan before, had absolutely no idea what to expect. And I'm sitting there, I'm a Toronto girl, thinking like, okay, this will be a bit different. And I got there completely fish out of water, right? And I think that in that moment, I was so young. I think I was maybe 20 or 21. It really didn't seem like a big move to move because everyone, after they graduated school, if they wanted to report, kind of bopped around, right? It just felt so normal in my circle that it didn't feel so crazy. And then I got there, and there are tons of challenges when you move somewhere new, and I didn't know a single person in that entire province. So it's really, a challenge to start all over again, not just then, but then like over and over and over again. Like I moved from Regina to Edmonton, Edmonton to Toronto. And so I think I learned quickly how to create community and connection wherever I am.
Mhm.
And I think that's like a life skill that's so important because when you and I are able to just up and move, create friendships, create family, create community. I think that just makes you feel at home
It
wherever
builds
you are.
character too, right? It builds character. You're forced to interact and, get out of your comfort zone. Because I started my career in Timmins. I had
Right.
no idea what Timmins was, packed up my family and moved.
Yeah.
No idea like where we're gonna live. I just knew I wanted to do the job and I had to get started. But it's
Yeah.
a lot. It was a bit of a culture shock for me because it's totally different from Toronto. And I'm sure
Yeah.
Virginia was completely different life and lifestyle, right? From Toronto.
Absolutely. And I had never been that far away from home and my parents. And, I think even Timmins to Toronto, I think there would have been like, if something happened, I could call my dad and say, "Can you come? I don't know, this pipe burst. I don't know what to do?" And there's something about being super removed where you just don't have a choice. You have to figure things out on your own.
Yeah. And fast forward to now, you're in New York City. Every journalist's dream to work in New York City with CBS. Tell us how that all came about, Chanel.
Yeah, I mean, I was living and working in Toronto, and that was my dream.
Hmm.
I had moved to Regina and moved to Edmonton, and got this dream job offer at
That's always been the plan.
CP24.
That's always been the plan for you to work in Canada and move to New York.
Oh, I don't know. Moving to New York was never the plan. I'll say it was a dream.
Wow.
But the plan and the dream in my mind, for many years in Canada was just to get back to Toronto.
Hmm.
And to be at CP24 was like, the
Mississauga was your home, correct?
I grew up in Mississauga, yeah. And so, for folks in the GTA, like CP24 is just everywhere, right? It is like the place to be, the coolest place to work. It feels very young and fresh, and that's where I wanted to be. And I got this job offer when I was in Edmonton. And funny enough, I had felt so rooted in Edmonton that my husband and I bought a house there. We're like, I think we can stay here. Like we're having a good time. We had great friends. You're kind of close to the mountains, and so I think just the way that life works is so unexpected sometimes that we felt so happy there. We bought this house, and then this job offer happened like almost right after the same year.
Talk about
And
navigating change. Oh my gosh, what a change.
yeah, we had to kind of
Thought
make
you
this
were starting
decision.
somewhere and you're gonna stay there, and then this happened. So how did you manage that, handling that? Like how did you
Yeah. I think thankfully I have always been a person who is very decisive and just knows what the gut feeling is in that moment. And I knew when I got the job offer in Regina, we had to go. I knew when I was in Edmonton and I got that job offer in Toronto, we got to go. And so I did, and it was a lot, right? You're managing. Also, when you're with somebody else, I think you have to factor in their life too. It's not just me anymore. So, as you know, with your husband and your kids, so it's a lot of like how much is what I want important in the situation? How are we going to manage this together? And how are we going to create this new life in Toronto? And so, it was really challenging for my partner, but thankfully is super supportive. And so was able to move finally. We were in Toronto, we got married, and, all my family is there. So it was just such an amazing time to be doing the job that I love doing in the city that I grew up in. And, there's so much power to that where you feel like, oh, I can just call so and so because something happened in this neighborhood, and I know the guy in the coffee shop there, and it felt so much fun. It was a true homecoming for a long time.
and now you left. And then you left to move to
And
New
then
York.
yeah, and then we were in Toronto, and then this job offer happened at CBS, and I had these dreams of living in New York since I was young because we would come to New York often because Toronto is easy to get to New York from. And so, we'd come on family trips here. I came a couple times when I was in university and, took the overnight Greyhound, which I'm sure you've taken as well.
Yeah.
Quite the journey.
10
And
hours.
so, yeah, I think it's like a 10-hour overnight bus ride. I couldn't imagine doing that today, but when you're young and didn't have a lot of money, and so I was just happy to get here. And I remember walking around New York City just feeling like everywhere you look and everyone you meet is so inspiring. Everyone's busy and doing something great and interesting. And I think there was always this dream to live here, but I don't ever think that it was something I thought would really happen to me until it happened. And then I was like, I don't believe this. I don't think this is real. You know? And you go through like all that imposter syndrome stuff where you're like,
Yeah.
do I deserve this? Is this really happening to me? But now it's been like 2.5 years, and I can say like I'm feeling like, okay, it's real. I've pinched myself enough times.
I know, but you're continuing to have these pinch me moments, like the Times Square billboard. Can we talk about that?
Oh
That
my
is
gosh.
just that gave me the chills when I saw that.
It
I
gave
was
me the
like,
chills too.
wow, this Canadian journalist is killing it. How did that even happen? I mean, we're just so proud of you. Like
You're so kind to say that.
this is such an incredible achievement, Chanel. Tell us how that happened.
There's so many moments, like Times Square. Last year, I was fortunate to go to the celebration of Diwali at the White House, and then I just went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner a few weeks ago. And yeah, I just think there's been so many moments lately that I could have never imagined myself in those rooms, in those spaces. Um, but I think it really proves that anything is possible because that little girl who grew up in Mississauga would have never thought that she would be sitting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner a few weeks ago. Never, ever. And I remember sitting in that room, looking around, really taking this in. And I think when you grow up in Canada too, you have so much gratitude to be here and to witness it, especially when you grow up with American television news being like sort of the holy grail in our industry, right? And so I'm like sitting in
It's a
this
big
room with,
deal. It's a big
yeah,
deal.
with these people that I grew up watching, whose stories I've admired, and now I'm getting to sit there with them. And so, yeah,
The fact that
I'm
this was
very
only a
grateful.
dream for you. This was only a dream, and you didn't never
Only a
even
dream.
thought once that you would be in that seat. And the White House Correspondents' Dinner I was going to get to, that is also like, what was it like just being there, representing Canadians, representing your culture, to be a part of that event? What was going through your head at that moment?
I think that last year when I went to the White House for the Diwali party, I remember while I was getting ready and I was putting on, my Indian clothes because it was a celebration for Diwali, and I really that day, and my husband had said this, my dad had said it earlier that day, like make sure you're present. Just like do not let this day go by without really taking it in. And so I was really conscious about, wow, I'm putting on clothes that, by the way, were not cool growing up. These were not
Okay.
celebrated outfits. And I remember when I was younger that my dad was like, oh, you're going to a dance at school or prom or graduation. Wear a lehenga, wear a sari, wear your Indian clothes. And I'm like, oh my God, no, that's so embarrassing, because it wasn't cool.
Mhm.
And then there I was last year wearing a lehenga very proudly to the White House for a celebration of South Asian excellence. And I think that really was the moment that I was like, oh my God, where am I? Like,
Even
you know,
Your Times Square billboard also you were wearing, it's for Diwali feature, correct?
it was for the Diwali, yeah.
And you were also wearing the same
And I
thing.
think this is a really magical moment in North America where, and you're doing this episode for AAPI month. Like, I don't even remember AAPI month being a thing
It
10
wasn't
years
a
ago,
thing
even,
before.
Yeah. And it's great that we have a month to just have a special focus on Asian excellence because there is a lot of it out there.
And there's a lot of people like yourself just really killing it, yeah, globally. Chanel, how do you even stay grounded with all the achievements so far that you've had?
Oh, my family will keep me very grounded.
Yeah.
Like most of our, I feel like a lot of other Asians will resonate with this, but like when I was younger, I remember getting like an A and I would bring it home on a paper and my parents would be like, "Well, why isn't it an A plus?"
Mhm.
And I think that that is the way that they parented when I was little. That is the way
That
that
is
they
so
parent
Asian.
now.
So Asian.
Yeah, that will keep you humble. That will always keep you humble. No matter what I do, they're like, "Okay, yeah, but like rub some dirt on your face now, you know?"
Exactly, exactly. And you also had a chance to teach at your alma mater,
Mm.
TMU, used to be Ryerson. What was that like? Like, is this something that you'd want to continue doing and, teaching and mentoring other aspiring journalists?
That actually happened so organically. I had reached out to a former professor who was at that point the head of the Department of Journalism. And it was after a conversation that I'd had with a few friends in journalism. And we were all talking about how the TMU program is great. And we had all graduated from that program, but that it lacked, in that really critical moment of graduation where you're sending out resumes for the first time and doing interviews for the first time, it lacked you know, a, a space and a focus on how to tell your own story. Because I think that you spend 4 years learning how to craft a story with someone else being the character in the story, which is that is journalism. But I think what we were talking about in that moment with my friends was we wish we had some guidance on how to tell your own story. Because when you're in an interview, you got to tell someone why they need to hire you. And
Hmm.
you have to think about what are the moments that I want to share about my life? What are the things that I think I should highlight in that moment? And I was like, wow, it'd have been great if someone could just tell me, here's a bit of a guide on how you should do that.
Mhm.
Because I think you're so conditioned and trained, rightfully so, as a journalist to think not about yourself because you are not the story.
Yeah.
And anyway, we'd had this discussion and I reached out to my professor and I was like, I really think that there could be some guidance offered to students as they're graduating on this topic. And he's like, yeah, why don't you create some kind of like presentation? You can come in, talk to the kids. I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Let me work on this. And I started working on this presentation. And then that summer he phoned me and he was like, I actually have this vacancy for, an instructor position, and I need someone to come in and teach news production. So, editing and interviewing and how to put a story together, essentially. Do you think you'd be up for it? And, honestly, I had never thought about that. I've never really seen myself, as a mentor in that way to anybody. Um, but I was like, you know what? Yeah, what do I have to lose? I'll help you out. It'll be fun. Let's see what happens. And so I went into TMU that fall to start teaching news production. And I have to say that when I reflect on that experience, and I ended up staying for 2 years in that program, but I learned so much from them
Mhm.
because I think that you get really caught up in, the way that you do your job and the demands of daily news and all of that stuff. And it gave me pause. I got to hear from them about how they're reading news, how they're consuming some of the stories that we're telling. And I think that's really key for us because that's going to tell us how and when the industry is going to change and pivot, right? And so, yeah, I think that was super fascinating for me to hear about how they're consuming news, what kinds of stories and topics they're interested in. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I feel like I actually learned a ton. I loved
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. You not only taught them, but you also learned yourself. And I'm sure that was a very rewarding experience. But let's go back when when you talked about, pivoting in this media landscape.
Mm,
I'm curious on your thoughts on where the industry is right now, the fast, changing landscape of media. Can you just, especially here in Canada, I'm sure you're in touch with a lot of the journalists here still, and you're
hmm.
aware of what's going on. It's changing rapidly. Can you just like give us your perspective on that?
Yeah, I wish I had a really great answer to that. I feel like we're all asking ourselves that question right now.
Yeah.
But
I
I
mean,
think
I
this
just
like
remember going to school for broadcast. I was so excited. This is
yeah.
being on TV is just such a prestigious career. And it's just changing now, with all the layoffs that's been happening here in Canada. Like, it's quite heartbreaking, like what's going on, with how the internet is and social media is changing everything, the way we deliver news. So, what would be your advice to aspiring journalists who are in it right now, who are studying to
Yeah.
become journalists?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and I actually think that and what you're saying is true, right? That social media is changing the way that we do our jobs, and that, for those of us who started in the industry maybe 10 or 15 or more years ago, this wasn't a part of our daily jobs.
Mhm.
And now it's not just a part of our jobs. I think it's like it's going to be our jobs in the future. And when I hear from folks who really want to break into the TV news scene, I say to them, and something I'm trying to teach myself is like, how can I share more of the work that I'm doing on television on all these other platforms that exist? Because that's where most of my friends and family are getting their news, if we're being honest, right? And so I think that while social media can play a complicated role in the future of journalism, I also think it can be really empowering for young people. It's giving them a voice. They don't have to wait till they get their dream TV job to be sharing stories. They can start doing that and figure out an audience and figure out a following, without having the platform that we've all aspired to for a long time. So I think it can be really empowering.
Mhm. And tell me like some of the life skills that you've learned over the years that you've just carried on and that have really contributed to your success. Can you give us maybe like, sorry about that. Can you give us like three, skills that have, helped you navigate change to get you to where you are
Mm.
today?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is creating community. And the life of a journalist is such that you're often on the road, you're moving from city to city. And I think you have to have the ability to create connection, create community wherever you are. And I
Mhm.
think that I've been so lucky that that served me so well. And by the time I moved to New York, because I had moved around so much before that, I got here and I sort of knew how to hit the ground running. And to your point about social media, I actually think interestingly, that's been a huge, huge game changer for me. When I moved to Regina many, many moons ago, that social media wasn't really that big of a thing. It wasn't so a community, so to speak.
Mhm.
Now we have this whole other community, and so I think if you can learn to leverage that and make connections there, and figure out who your people, who your allies can be, that's such an easy way to really feel like you have connection where you are.
And here in New
Um,
York, you are part of a group, correct? Like a women's group? Is it
yeah,
the
so when I moved here, just like a lot of other moves for me, I didn't have any friends or family in New York City. So I knew people who knew people, but I didn't directly, have a base of people I could lean on here right away. And then also I had moved into this role where I was working overnight hours, which can be, as you know, very difficult to meet people even within your own company. So I sort of found myself at a loss for like where to go when I had questions, where to go when I needed some mentorship or advice.
Mhm.
And so I joined the News Women's Club of New York, seeking exactly that. And I found this amazing network of women in all kinds of different industries. There's people in magazine, television, print, freelance, podcasting, all of these different things. And it became a home for me where, I knew who to go to when I needed help. And then, yeah, last year there was an opening for a board member to come in and help with event planning. So that's a new role that I've
Wow.
taken on. And now I'm the VP of programming for the club, which, I'm grateful to be sort of a leader and get to plan events for us to get together and just celebrate the work we do and commiserate sometimes because this can be a tough industry. So, I think you need to have that.
What a great way to meet people in the city too, right? And just like surrounding yourself with inspiring women. I'm sure you're very lucky with
Yes.
all these members that you're meeting. And what a great way, because it is hard in a city like New York. It's hard to meet people. And Vancouver, when I moved to Vancouver, it was tough to meet people. You had to be part of groups, right?
Mm.
To engage with the community. Um, and Chanel, this is a very simple question, yet complex. Are you are you happy with where
Wow.
you're right now? Are you happy?
I love that question so much. Nobody asks that question. That is such a great question. I have to say that,
Loaded question.
yeah, I love that. I'm so happy. Um, I'm so lucky to be able to do the job that I love, but I also feel like I have in recent years, even when I was in Toronto, because I think this has always been a very, tough industry. And with everything that's changing, I think there's so many uncertainties. And I remember when I was in Toronto, I decided to make a distinct choice to separate my personal identity from the job that I do. And while I love my work, I think there are a million different ways to be a storyteller, if that's what you love doing. And so, yeah, when I say that I tell you that story just to say that I'm happy and I'm grateful for the job that I do, but I'm just also grateful for the life that I have, because at the end of the day, I think that having community, having family, having friends That's the stuff that matters.
Mhm. And can you tell me some of the biggest hurdles that you've gone through? Because, the thing with social media is you only see the output. You only see the great stuff. You're at the
Sure.
billboard, you're on TV, but there's stuff going on behind the scenes and that, not a lot of people see, right? So they only see the good stuff. This is what social media has done to us. Like you don't see what goes on. And what are some of the biggest hurdles that you've try to overcome when you move to New York?
Wow. I mean, the New York move was equal parts exciting and equal parts terrifying. You know, all of the amazing, beautiful things that New York is known for is also so, so scary when you are new to all of it, right? And here I am, this like little Canadian in New York City trying to figure it out.
We see
So
all the good things, Chanel. We see everything on your social media, your success. But what are some of the things that people actually don't know that, are hard for you? You know,
yeah. Yeah, well, it's funny.
how
I
do you
remember
navigate that?
I remember my very first day of work here in New York City. And I don't think I was supposed to be on air. At least I didn't think I was going to be on air. I hadn't even gotten like a computer or a work cell phone or anything sorted out yet. And they called me earlier in the day and they were like, actually, there's this House vote happening and there's been already a number of votes, but we think that the final vote could happen today. And so, come on in and we'll put you on air. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? Literally Googling politicians' names and figuring out how to pronounce them just so I didn't say something wrong on air. So
A lot
I
of
think there was
pressure.
like, yeah, and I that night I walked into the building and I walked right into the studio, did not have a computer, I didn't have anything set up yet, went on air and delivered this broadcast. And I think that was my like entrance into American television news. And that was a culmination of all of the years that you've done all of the work and it shows up in that moment and you have to just trust yourself. And I think that was the first night where I was like, this is not going to be easy, but you are going to figure it out.
So now in your life, what is next for you? I mean, you seem to have reached the goal, the dream. What are you looking forward to?
Well, first of all, I don't know that this is the goal or the dream. I think I'm just
Well, this
living
was
in
your
this
dream back in the day. Like,
I'm
when
just
start,
living in this little slice of life right
uh-huh.
now, and grateful for every minute of it.
What else do you want to do, Chanel? You're doing this amazing job and you're living in New York. What else do you see yourself doing? Like what else is there? Like are you good for a while, living this life, or is there something else that you want to achieve down the road?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the big goal actually that maybe people don't know about, the stuff behind the scenes that people don't know about, that they don't see on social media, is that part of this journey of moving to the States involved having a long distance marriage for 2 years.
Mm.
So my husband just moved here a couple months ago, and I think for those 2 years, it sort of felt like marriage was on hold
Mhm.
because I was living this big life in New York, getting used to things here, meeting new friends, creating a new community, but all of that like without your other half. And
That's what people
not,
did
not to,
not see. That's what people
yeah,
did not.
and I think a lot of people didn't know that, and I think that's the hardship that you don't see on social media. Is like it's hard to start over again and do all of these new things and figure all, there's so much red tape and paperwork, and you're burdened with all of these other unsexy things that you don't see on Instagram in real life. And so that just it was hard to maneuver all of that. And so this slice of life for me now is I hate to use the word balance because I truly don't think it exists. But a little more life, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I'm just leaning into being home more and enjoying our space more and watching movies at night because I think that with all the chaos and beauty that comes in New York, I think also just you need a little bit of solitude and peace at home. And
Mhm.
so we are just enjoying being together after a very long time and exploring and doing all of the New York things together after a very long time of being apart.
Mhm. And yeah, so I did ask earlier. So for now, you're good. Like, is there like any other interests that you want to pursue like down the road that as other than journalism? Like, do you have any other aspirations?
Yeah, I mean, I think at my core, I love telling stories. I don't know if it's going to look exactly like this for the rest of my life, for the rest of my career necessarily. And I'm trying to learn how to lean into telling stories in different ways and trying to teach myself TikTok and Instagram Reels because
Right.
that's what the folks are doing now. These kinds of things feel a little bit unfamiliar to me, and I think when you come from a very traditional um, news format, you're used to almost being a perfectionist about things, and so I'm trying to teach myself how to not be so perfect about
Mhm.
every single thing that I put out there because
Yeah.
um, when you talk about the authenticity piece, I think people are way more interested now in transparency and in the process of how you're making news, more than watching like a 6 minute piece
Mhm.
on that aired on TV. That they're just not going to watch that on my Instagram probably.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, what I'm trying to learn is a little bit more about how else I can tell stories outside of just this one very traditional legacy format.
Mhm.
That's what I'm interested in. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like in a couple of years or beyond, but I think I'm a storyteller at heart.
Yeah. And you're gonna be a storyteller basically. No matter what you do, you're gonna have storytelling in there. Chanel, if you were to give three things, three advice for people, three tips for people
Mm,
who are trying to navigate change, what would they be?
mm. Something that Sean O'Shea had told me when I was very young and interning with him was be good at everything anyone ever asks you to do. And that really stuck with me because I think when you're early on in your career, people ask you to get their lunch and get them coffee and all of those things that I think can be written off really easily. And when he told me that, I thought, yeah, I'm going to be really good at getting someone coffee or getting them lunch or delivering a package or whatever it was. I'm going to do it with a smile. And I think that was one of the most brilliant pieces of advice I ever got because people remember that. People remember when you do something with a smile that maybe the other person, the other intern didn't want to do
Yeah.
or felt above or whatever. And then they trust you when there's another task at hand. And maybe one day they'll trust you with something that's a little bit more editorial. And that's how, you get the in. And so that was an amazing piece of advice that I always tell young people when they ask me. Another thing that I think I'm teaching myself now is, and I said I don't love the word balance because I think that's just like a very hard thing to actually achieve and it can look different for different people. But I have
Loaded
recently
word.
decided,
Striving
yeah,
balance.
yeah. And I know sometimes it's like a trigger word for people, so I'm like careful about how I use it. But I have actually recently tried to put more of a focus on my health because I think that for a lot of us who are so passionate about what we do, being a workaholic, so to speak, doesn't actually seem like a bad thing because you love what you do. And so often I'll just be like, yeah, I'm going to go in on a day off because I just want to do this extra story or this extra bit of work. And I feel fine about it. But, I really think the body keeps the score. And I had to do a little check in last year where I was like, okay, I'm just not feeling like my best. My skin isn't my best. My body just isn't feeling as strong as it was before. And I've always thought like it's a little too self-indulgent to get a trainer or see a nutritionist. Like that feels like I thought I would feel guilty about that. But last year I made a very conscious decision last summer and I got a personal trainer. And I was like, surely this is something I am bad at and I need help with, and I need to put some resources into this part of my life. And I have to say that was one of the best decisions. And I think even if you're early, I wish I did this 10 years ago because
Mhm.
I think for me, anyways, unless I have someone waiting for me that's going to tell me what to do, I'm just not someone who's going to walk into a gym.
Yeah, yeah.
And this has been actually a huge game changer for me. And so sometimes I don't allocate enough time to do the things I need to do for my health and for my body. But when I have someone who's holding me accountable, I will do them. And I think that makes me better at my job. I'm brighter, I'm fresher, I'm more energized than ever before. And I think it can be overlooked, but it actually is what you need to do for yourself.
Investing in self-care, that's the way to go, right? Because we are workaholics, by nature, and we just won't take we will do everything else but take care of ourselves. Like that's how I've always been, but it's just such a great investment to invest in yourself. So I'm glad that I was actually going to ask you how you if you have any self-care routines that really helps you go, get through your day. Do you have any thing that you can share that you do every day that gives you that motivation?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple times a week I will see my trainer and I do just some stretches in the morning. And mostly I think that's just because I have developed some back pain last year. I guess this is what happens when you're in your mid 30s now.
Yeah, oh, wait till you get your 40s, honey.
Yeah, so I
45,
just I
so
do some gentle stretches. And then I'm a big eye patch girly. So if you
yeah.
see me in the office in the morning, you'll catch me with eye patches on for my self-care before makeup.
And your work hours are kind of all over the place, right? So you kind of have to adapt to, different sleeping patterns and, how do you even deal with that? That's tough. You're working different shifts usually. Is that right?
I'm on more of a schedule now than I was when I think we first connected because I was working overnights then, which I think the thing no one tells you about working overnights is it's not actually the hours. It's that if you want to do anything else, you have to do it when everyone else is working. And so, I have all these ideas, and in the last 2 years, it's like I wanted to pitch stories and I wanted to tell all these different stories on all these different platforms, but you have to be awake during the day to do that, to make those calls, to start reporting. And so I think that was actually the most trying part. It's not the actual overnight shift. It's that if you want to do more, you have to do it during daylight. And so now I'm very grateful to be not working that shift. And when you're working daytime hours, it's just so much easier to meet people organically, to have conversations in person, to float ideas with people in person. All of that just happens so much faster and so much easier.
Shanelle, thank you so much for your time today. You are just truly inspiring. Keep rocking it in New York City.
Thank you.
You're such an inspiration. Is there anything else that you would tell people out there just to how to thrive in life? If you your final words, what would you say to our audience?
And thank you, first of all, for all of those just like so sweet compliments. But before I moved to New York, I had to do a real check-in with myself about um, what is going to make me happy. And I'm so glad you asked that question. And it wasn't a particular job or a particular city. For me, it's always been, how can I best use the ideas that I have in my head, the resources that I have to tell stories? And it so happens to be this, and that's what makes me really happy. But I think that you have to find your purpose and your passion, and I think that is like the driving force to joy. It might not look the same for everybody else, but and I'm just like I'm speechless because I know you've been so kind and complimented me so much, and I'm so grateful if I can be an inspiration to anybody else who's watching or listening. But I don't ever think that you need to have a certain kind of success to feel joy and to feel passion and purpose and fulfillment and all those things. It can look so different, but I think as long as you're doing the thing that drives you, you're doing it right.
Chanel, that is exactly what I'm looking for. Thank you so much for that. You've given us so many tools and just, we celebrate you. Thank you for sharing your journey. And we can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you. Let's stay in touch.
Luxury innovation and German engineering, Liebherr sets the standard for premium refrigeration. Designed for performance and precision, Liebherr appliances offer advanced cooling technology, sleek designs, and unmatched reliability. Whether it's for a wine storage solution, column-style cooling, built-in, freestanding, or under counter, Liebherr delivers the ultimate freshness experience for your kitchen. Discover the excellence of Liebherr refrigeration today. Visit ela.ca to learn more. Evolved Media offers premium video production services specializing in creating high-impact content for brands, events, and commercials. From concept to execution, we craft engaging visual narratives that resonate with your target audience. We have teams in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and Calgary, And in today's digital-first world, video content is more important than ever. It's the most effective way to capture attention, build brand loyalty, and drive conversions. You can email us at info@evolvemagazine.ca to get a custom quote. Thank you so much for watching and listening in. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to share with you our next guest. But for now, I hope you can follow and subscribe. Thanks for your support.